Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today to discuss The Last of the Atalanteans with author P.L. Stuart. We will be discussing the book, and we have another guest here, Mr. Miles.
Ah,
Welcome. So we'll start with some non-spoilers, and then we'll get into the spoiler stuff. So we'll warn you, but we will be getting mostly into spoilers. So just a heads up. So PL, will you start us off with introductions, please?
hi there, everyone. I'm P.L. Stuart. I'm the author of the Drowned Kingdom Saga. Book one, The Drowned Kingdom, is the first book. It's out now, and The Last of the Atalanteans, the second book. Currently working on Lord and King, which should be, oh, thank you, Christian, which should be coming out in the next few months. So very excited about being able to discuss that with some wonderful people.
Forget I was on mute. And Jenny?
I'm here, and I'm obviously the tech gump in the whole group because I can't make my freaking my camera work. So you're looking at my horse. But I'm really thrilled to be here. It feels like a party with some great friends. And I can't wait to talk about this book. It's mind-blowing what Paul is doing, P.L. Stewart is doing with this series, and the more he does, the better it gets. I have read the third book, and the second book will not prepare you for what he's going to blow the lid off on the third. So I can't wait to discuss it.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Layla?
Yeah, I'm Layla Goshi. I'm an English professor in St. Louis, Missouri, and I edit a web magazine called Felony Magazine, and I did thoroughly enjoy this book as well.
Yes. And Miles?
I'm Miles Cameron. I also write the occasional fantasy novel, and I very much enjoyed this book as well. And in fact, I read it last week, so I'm behind Jenny, but I certainly have things to say, and it is brilliant. And I echo both of your comments. A pleasure to read. And Paul, you just keep hitting it out of the park.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Boy, look at that. He had that spiffy background, and it changed. That is neat. You started out with a forest, and now you got all these cool weapons.
Cool weapons are us. It's my
I can
store on
attest
the
to
internet.
that.
Cool.
I attest to that.
So P.L., I guess we can start with a couple of non-spoiler questions. But after Drowned Kingdom, what was your goal going into book two? What challenges did you face?
Well, book two was very much about, picking up. I left book one on a cliffhanger, and for some people that may or may not have been problematic, but that was a decision I made because I felt that the story needed to end there. And in book two, it was all about essentially picking up this journey that the main character was on to try and salvage a kingdom. And in that, he came up with a pretty crazy plan that had a slim chance of success. But this is a man who believes in rolling the dice and taking big gambles, and that's exactly what he did. The book itself is very much about changing of the guard in some ways, because if the plan is successful, then his people, Othman's people, are essentially no longer going to be what they are. If the plan fails, they're going to be wiped from history and existence. And if the plan succeeds, then he will essentially have a new kingdom, and his followers will no longer be Atalanteans, so to speak. They will be part of another kingdom, part of something else. So, it's a big transition book where people will have to ponder the fact that the Atalanteans will definitely not be what they were, and the main character will definitely be changed as he undergoes this journey.
I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if anyone has an extra tab open or something. But in the meantime, Taylor, welcome. Thanks for joining us. That was morning.
Hey guys.
How was your morning?
It was a morning. It was a morning. But things are done now. So sorry I'm late, everyone. But I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about the last of the Atalanteans behind me here on screen. Yes. What did I miss? Just an introduction by PL? Okay.
Yeah, and we were going to have a couple of non-spoiler questions. So if you have a non-spoiler question, feel free.
Non-spoiler question. I think most of mine are pretty spoilery.
Oh, see Christian putting up his hand there.
Okay.
Bill, why don't you talk a little about your inspiration for the cultures that the Atlanteans are encountering?
Oh, thank you. That's an excellent question. So, for those who've read the book, obviously, the Atalanteans are a unique culture, I believe. They believe that they're a peerless civilization, that they are one of a kind. Their culture, has been dominant for 500 years, a very insular culture, whereby, they enjoyed naval supremacy, military supremacy, and almost unmatched and untested supremacy in a lot of ways. When they come to Crimea, they're encountering cultures that the main division is religion. The Atalanteans are monotheistic and they worship a single god. And there's two main regions in the continent they come to called the Crimea. One is known as Sanavia in the north, and one's known as Eltnia in the south. And the Elvish predominantly worship six what they describe as elemental goddesses, and they have mages that they believe wield the power of these goddesses. And in the north in Sanavia, the people from those lands worship mainly three primary gods, and that is more of almost like a Norse type, akin to analogous to a Norse type, land. So and Eltnia would be a lot more like an ancient Britain in terms of most of it geographically. However, there are some areas of the south that you start to see a bit more of an Eastern type, Middle Eastern type geographical and cultural influence. So, and then further on across the channel from the main Crimean continent is almost a subcontinent where the Anib, which is analogous to like a united African nation, where they exist. So that's essentially the kind of cultures that you can expect Othran to encounter. Not all at once, but he has encountered some of them during the book.
Yeah, I had a question too, kind of following up on culture. I'm thinking more in regard to world building in general, because you do have different worlds. You have the Atalantean island world, and then we're going through not only cultures, but the landscapes. And just as a writer, did you have a way of keeping yourself on track with that, or making sure that you were making certain distinctions, or just what was your approach with that?
Well, as I think Janny and Christian will attest, who have written these epic, fantastic fantasies, as you know, I'm part of the Christian and Miles Cameron and Janny Words fan club. You'll see their books displayed behind me. But you tend to, I think, for a lot of writers who write epic fantasy, do a lot of world building behind the scenes and prior to even, putting pen to paper in terms of, or finger to keyboard in terms of actually writing your novel. So I have appendices, family trees, histories of lineages of kings and queens. I have all that already built, and I also have a lot in my imagination that actually isn't written down. So it's quite easy when you have all that as reference material, and maps as well for reference, that the world building itself, you essentially follow the guide of the map. You try and keep things to scale, obviously. You realize that, okay, this is 10 miles from that city and that's where they're going. So it isn't, that part isn't as difficult if you do a lot of world building behind the scenes. So that's what I've done. Some of that extends to languages as well, although you don't see that as much in the first few books, but perhaps that may be featured a bit more prominently in subsequent books. Sorry.
One of the things that super impressed me, I trust we can talk about the beginning of this book because that doesn't really spoil anything, is coming off of the first book when you see everything that Othran lost And he's here in a new land. He's got a whole band of people he's responsible for. And he's caught in a plot where one of his allies is in deep trouble. And it's sort of like a bridge between worlds, because he has to trust his people to somebody else, even rivals, even ambitious people who might take over. He has to experience the life from the bottom up for really the first time in support of an ally that he barely knows. And in seeing the underside of the societies that normally he would have walked on top of, this book was a stroke of genius in that the way you built his character and took his top to bottom personality and shoved him in a bottom up situation where his mettle was really going to be tested. And he encountered every kind of everything from a direction he was not accustomed to seeing. It was a brilliantly realized journey. And the way you kicked that off and the way you walked through the stages, you also saw a lot of aspects of the world that you would not have seen from his former position. What gave you the idea of doing it that way, or did it just kind of pop out?
Well, what I try to do it's a 7-book series, and I believe my world is fairly large in scope. So what I try to do with each book is I don't move the camera lens too far. We tend to mostly focus on one or two nations, for example. But you see a lot of those nations. You get to see different parts of it. Hopefully, you get to see different different stratas of society. You get to see a bit of the downtrodden, the poor. You get to see the more rich, the elite. You get to see the royals. But you see it in a rather compressed fashion. With the Drowned Kingdom, for example, we spent a lot of time on that beach in Iremia. And and then moving on towards their goal of one offense party, moving on towards their goal of luncheon, and then predominantly book 2, it's mostly set in luncheon, and then of course as near the end of the book, going towards the end goal. So for me, I try to keep things expansive, but yet actually somewhat small per book. You're actually only seeing, I guess comparatively a relatively small geographic area in terms of a nation or two. And then slowly as each book, because I have the luxury of having 7 books, as you go through each book and you see another few areas, at the end of the series, you'll have quite a wide lens in terms of most of the entire continent. So.
One of the places where you really truly shine is showing characters with all of their flaws and their strengths. And I think one of the most impressive places in this story was actually where Othran has these new allies. He has to swear vassalship to them. He has to give his all to support them in their difficulty. And then you see the flaws, and then you see the kind of dirty linen in the background. And it gives you this kind of crisis moment, is which way is this arrogant character going to fall? Is he going to support and continue to honorably follow under these people? And your way of handling the flawed character, the flawed leader, the mistakes, the intrigues in the background blew me away. You don't often see it that well done in fantasy.
Well, thank you, Jenny. Sorry, Christian, go ahead. Well,
I just want to add to what Jenny said, because he can be difficult to like. He is not an easy person. And what I really enjoyed reminded me of something we were repeatedly told in the military, that if you wish to lead well, you must follow well. And I really appreciated how often he invested trust. He may not be very good at race or misogyny, but he is willing to invest trust. And that investment of trust makes him much more likable. And I think begins to ensure that some of the people following him say, he can follow as well as lead. We might have wondered about that. And I just thought that was, I'm sort of embroidering on Janny's comment, but some of the best moments are the moments where he sort of has to decide, like, really, I'm really doing this. And he mostly comes down on, I don't want to spoiler already, but he mostly comes down on the side of, I am investing my trust in this and my goal is worthy. So yeah, we're going forward. And I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed that peek into the good part of his character because he can be difficult, something you've done very well and that I know is being done on purpose.
Well, thank you, Miles. And I would have to say as well that part of that, I mentioned his risk-taking nature. Part of that is because he is such a gambler. He does wager a lot on a single throw, essentially. So in order to do that, he must trust. He is forced to take those chances to trust people. And because he's decided to go enter this ruse and go on a mission essentially of subterfuge, where he's hiding in plain sight as essentially a common soldier, he knows that to a certain extent his power has been taken away from him and neutered, or at least temporarily until the time comes to show himself. So in that, he realizes he is smart enough to realize that he can't be the same person. He has all the same thoughts. He experiences all that frustration that he can't just step forward and be, I'm the man, and I'm going to take charge here, and I'm going to lead us, and I'm going to show you the way, as he is used to doing. And he also likes to be the center of attention. Hubris is something that is part of Othrin's personality. He likes to be seen and perceived as the person with the plan, the person in charge, and the person who is leading you to this direction. He obviously has a lot of self-confidence issues, but I think hopefully I illustrated in the book that a lot of his self-confidence issues, aside from all his backstory and his dysfunctional family issues and all those things, comes down to the angel and the fact that essentially he is, in his own mind, a usurper. And on one hand, and that's probably a central part of the book, that if Othrin believes what he believes in terms of what the angel's telling him, he is stealing leadership and potentially stealing a throne. Or is he mad? Or is he mistaken? And that plays with his head, and that affects his ability to lead to a certain degree. But to his credit, he managed to overcome that. Now, the way he overcomes that in some ways is quite ruthless, and he is at his core a pragmatist as well. If you recall from the book, Othrin is not above disinheriting people from their rightful position and claims. He's not above lying. Yeah, he's not above murder. He is not above anything that it takes to get what he feels that he deserves and what his destiny is. He is hell-bent to achieve that, and he's not going to let anything stand in the way. And when he has those moments faced with, I can take this extreme action, or I can't, or I won't, my morals, my ethics, whatever you'd like to call it, could potentially get in the way, he's going to take the extreme action because that's going to get him to where he needs to be to attain his goals. So,
yeah, I want to follow up on that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, Layla, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Oh, no. I just want to follow up on that. Are we getting into spoiler territory a little? Yeah.
Sure.
Well, first, I agree with everything that was said, but, even though he is a personality that will do what it takes, he is still stunned to hear Yedwal admit what he did, and he kind of takes a high road, attitude about, I can't remember exactly what he said, but sort of like completely shocked that Yedwal would do such a thing. And in fact, Yedwal didn't even do it for himself. He did it for, his king. And so I think it's just well done that we see Othrin not really being aware of himself and what he's capable of at the same time. It's like he's rejecting that, but at the same time, he is making those decisions, such as when he had, Saida killed. And so I found that really great. And just as a slight chuckle, when he was in the position of reporting to others, he still has this internal monologue of, oh, if they only knew who I was, and I enjoyed that as well, because it kind of showed, that ego is still there.
That beautiful scene where he's in, what was it, Paw?
Yeah.
And he's having that argument with Lycée about how those kingdoms took care of their veterans that were wounded. And he's looking at through his haughty, arrogant glasses, and this is ridiculous. They're just whores. You're just shoveling these people out of society. And she's showing him very plainly, this is how we take care of our people. This is how we make sure that they're comfortable and they feel appreciated and loved. That arrogance just gets in the way. And that struck me with his discussion with Yedwall, when Yedwall admits to these huge atrocities. And yet that was when Othran, fighting the Barefit, got his knighthood. So it was the same thing mirrored, but he's got this very, very stubborn, arrogant streak that will not see it. He will not see himself as at fault, even when it's in his face. So, yeah, he's a difficult character to like, and you've given him just enough honorable grit that you forgive that until it kicks your teeth out again. So it's fun. I love being ping-ponged like that by a character. It's really wonderful because life does that. People do that. And yet too many times books don't do that. They're too afraid to throw it into your teeth.
Yeah, Othran is extremely adept at seeing his flaws and extremely blind to his flaws at the same time. And it is such a dichotomy that he is essentially a mirror in many ways for his uncle, Yedwall. He's patterned himself after Yedwall in many ways because of their relative position in Atlantean society, Othran being the younger brother and spare heir to the future king, and Yedwall being the same. Othran aspired essentially to pattern his life after Yedwall and become a warlord, become his brother's main advisor. That was essentially what he saw his life was going to be. And Yedwall is also representative. He's the embodiment of the colonial superpower that is Atalantics. He is the living embodiment. He's really the last main vestige of that empire that people look to say, okay, this is what we were. And Othran is extremely, he cannot let go of, unfortunately, as much as he has some of these great qualities, the pettiness of his own his own traits. For example, if you recall, Senti, it's all a ruse. Senti needs to pick a captain of the guard. It's all a ruse. They're pretending. He picks Thurl. Othran's mad because, well, why'd you pick me on the like? He doesn't see he doesn't. These are the little petty, silly things that in the middle of a life and death situation he's focused on. When they have to go to the ship pits to which is that was the most fun scene I think to write, when you see Othran humble to the fact where he's literally wading ankle through shit, right, because he has to. He has that moment with Glatton, one of the true noble characters in the book, and he's like, why do you believe in me? I basically have you wading through shit, right? And Glatton's basically, well, it's because you have us wading through shit that I believe in you, right? So, sorry, Miles, you had a question.
I don't think it's really my turn. I think Taylor was trying to go about 2 goes ago.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Taylor.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So my original question was trying to keep into spoiler-free territory. So what I think I'll do is I'll push that later because the discussion we're on now kind of I have a couple things I want to say. But one thing that I really enjoy, like everyone said, is having this first-person perspective allows you to get really close to the flaws of Othran, which you're talking about. And one thing I really appreciate is how flawed he is, because if one thing that he thinks doesn't bother you, another thing he thinks will. So there were a couple times where I may have giggled at, something that he thought about hierarchy or, wading through shit or one of those things. But then later I would read something and it would actually piss me off. And I'm like, see, this is important, right, for the reader to experience. And one of those moments for me was, it's later in the book, but it's a very small line, but it shocked me, my reaction to it, because this is much later in the book. And after, I want to pronounce her name right, Alias. Yeah, okay. So there's this like perceived issue between Alias and Lycée, and we're not exactly sure how that's going to unfold yet. But Othran is thinking about it, and he says, I just hoped Alias was not envious of Lycée herself. And then after that, this first part of the sentence comes after him talking about how Alias would never be a queen in her own right, but Lissy would. And so I thought that's what you were talking about. But then the second part of the sentence says, was not envious of Lissy herself, thinking the queen of Nerima had some part of my heart. And that pissed me off because I was like, maybe she's envious that she can't be a queen because that's what you were just talking about. So just that one little sentence, like I tabbed it twice because I'm a tabber. I was like, why does that affect me so much? And I don't think it's surprising that me being a woman, the misogyny sticks out to me a lot. That's one part of his personality that gets me. And I just really wanted to say that I appreciate how you've put all of those points in there because something's going to reach someone.
Right.
That's a crucial point. Yes, Miles.
I'm sort of following along on Taylor. One of the things I like is when you're subtle. I don't mind when you're broad, but I like when you're subtle. And I hope that I'm not adding subtlety. So I'm going to ask this instead of tell it. It seems to me that Othran is sometimes an unreliable narrator. And my example, because I'm always interested in swordsmanship, is that he pretty much continually tells the reader that he's a great swordsman, and yet he is continually outperformed by some of the warriors around him. And I laugh every time that happens, and I hope you're doing that on purpose. And at the same time, I think sometimes I am that guy. So I sort of wince inside, but go like, yes, in his world, he's the greatest swordsman. And I love that. I think weirdly, and I've got two other examples, but I won't bore people. But weirdly, those are some of my favorite moments because you are really in your character's head. And I love that. Like, and you're writing a difficult character and you're in his head. And in his head, he's great.
You know what is cool too, or this is something that's just coming around, and I swear you're going to bite us in the ass with this later. You are going to bite us in the ass with this later. There's that moment when Othran admits to, I guess it's Hurt, that he could smell Lysy. And Hurt turned pale. And Hurt just dropped out of that conversation like a freaking stone. And Othran kind of notices that and then glosses on over it. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, we just stepped over a minefield here. That's going to explode in our faces later because there's something about his connection to the Mages. And there's something about Lysy's being able to call him out, know what he's thinking, and call him out every time. She's the one character in the book that really calls him and calls the shots when he's lying to himself. And she completely blows it up. You know, she says, here you are, you're supporting these allies, you're being totally honorable, you're gonna support them, you're gonna help them take back, and then you're gonna turn on them and you're gonna conquer their kingdoms and you're gonna make them your vassals. And she can see into his past. She calls him out on his past. She calls him out on his future. I can't wait to see how you're going to develop that because it's something that's sort of like this boulder trembling on the mountaintop in the background. And you're focused on the bigger events in the book. But I think that someday that's going to come around like, you know, jousting at the Pell where you miss and it hits you in the head.
Yeah, maybe in book 4, very early in book 4, it might come around. But I want to quickly talk. Those are excellent points. All of you, Taylor, Miles. I want to quickly address Miles' point as well first, because so if you read the book, especially the battle on the bridge, you know, where Othran is in the middle of a pretty chaotic scene, and he almost immediately would have died were it not for the skill and valor of the people around him. And you know, if you recall, just before they leave, you know, the little house they've been staying at, Senti's house, and they go out, you know, they're going out into unknown. They're going to go out and try and take the city back. And there's a conversation with Cricht, who is the chief Earl of Luncheon, and Cricht is very, you know, he's very open-minded, and he's like, listen, you know what? By protocol, you're technically the High Lord. He knows his identity as a prince. Do you want to lead? And Othran, for a moment, because he's wanted to lead this whole time. You remember his frustrations when, you know, he's being pursued through Luncheon. He's being harried with all these men hunting Welly. and he always has to keep his mouth shut and pretend he's a common soldier. And when people are negotiating, having parleys, he has to be like, I should be the one in the middle of that. I should be, But he actually, as Miles pointed out aptly earlier, he actually goes, you know what, Crick, the city, you're the chief for the luncheon. I'm kind of like a visiting soldier here. I'm just part of this enterprise. You lead, and that was hard for him, right? And Miles brought that up. That was hard for him. So I want to quickly mention Taylor in the misogyny, in that Othrin's biggest issue is that he is not only a product of his upbringing, he is not only a product of his culture, he is not only a product of essentially his time. He is a product of never having been challenged by a woman in any significant way until he landed on the shores of Crimea. So his issue is that there were no examples for him. In his mind, a strong woman was a woman who once in a while spoke up about, the color of the decor, or how the children should raise. Like that was his version of a strong woman. But now he's encountering a completely different kind of strong woman, which you will see increasing frequency examples of women who are far more formidable than Arthur in any way, and he must cope with that and his assumptions. So yeah, and Jenny, you know what? Yeah, what you mentioned is probably going to come around, and you've seen a bit of it, I think, in the third book, because I believe out of everyone, you're the one who's read the arc for the third book so far. But yeah, just wait till book 4.
Chekhov's guns, you've got them buried all over this book, and it's maddening because we gotta wait for you to write it.
That bridge scene was so great. It's so intense.
You like that, Steve?
Oh yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
the chaos comes through. Chaos is the perfect word. Because even after reading it, I wasn't sure what happened, and I'm sure that was the point. Because he didn't know what happened either.
Yeah, I loved the chaos, and I loved the fatigue.
Yeah, the battle and Christian as a combat expert, I'd love to hear his point of view specifically. But battle, from everything I've learned and read, especially in the medieval context, is completely chaotic. And when you're in the midst of that, you don't know, you might accidentally thrust and kill your partner. You might accidentally step on something and trip, and that's the end of you. It's not because you were necessarily brained, but you fell down and essentially bumped your head, or in this case, you fell off a bridge. There were so many ways that you could die in that instance, and some of it is dumb luck, and some of it is because, as Christian aptly pointed out, the skill of the people surrounding you. And if you recall, Othrin, for all of his supposed skill reputation, he wasn't put in the front rank, partly because he's a prince and he's valuable and he's supposed to be, eventually taking over a kingdom. But remember who's in the front rank, right? Hanny, Senti, and Thurl. Those are the people lifting the load. Those are the people that Welly believed were the people that they may die, but boy, they're going to take a few people with them, and they're probably going to witness this fight before they do. So, to Mal's point, for all of Othrin's belief that he is the best, it's not that he's not a competent soldier. I'm not saying that, but for all Othrin's belief that he is the peerless soldier, we see evidence to the contrary. Thurl, on the other hand, is a force to be reckoned with in every way, shape, and form. So, and the Glathan is quite a capable fighter as well. So, and much more experienced than Othrin. But Othrin has one thing going for him that seems to be, whether that's the magic of the angel and the protection, he has a lot of luck going for him. He would have died in that fight with Hor on the beach was he not armored. It would have been that one swing, that one cut, and Hor would have opened him up, would have dulled him, and it would have been the end of it. That would have been the end of Othrin and his grand tale. But he was wearing armor, and he was quick, and he's quick. He's quicker than Hor, and he got lucky. But I also want to paint the picture that some of these reputations that people earn, a lot of it's built in a fight on you got lucky, man. You got lucky and you survived. But of course, we all know how these things get exaggerated and blown out of proportion. Oh, now you're the greatest swordsman that the world has ever seen because you managed to defeat an opponent with reputation. You get your reputation on the back of someone else. You beat the big baddie, so now you're the big baddie. and that is what authoring a lot is resting on, in some ways. So
Good,
I
good,
love the
Miles.
earworm maggot. I love when his doubts come to the fore. He has this maggot in his mind that talks to him. That was brilliant.
Mm.
thank you.
Can I, sorry, I just want to refer to the comments coming from the chat. Heather H, way back at the beginning, was asking about did you make maps or how much collaboration was in the creation of the maps? And I just want to add in, have you ever used any of the online systems like World Anvil? And if you haven't, I want to put in a pitch for it because it's what I'm doing with my sci-fi universe. It's quite useful for organizing your thoughts and your maps and stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. No, those are basically entirely based, if I showed you the sketch which I don't have handy here, based on those maps are based on my very crude and kindergarten-ish like drawings of my universe, which a paid illustrator somewhat enhanced. I mean, my mountains are pretty more like just triangles, and he made them pretty. My rivers are kind of like just squiggly lines, and he made them pretty. And yeah, so but essentially, if you look at my original drawings, they're almost exactly, with the exception of the quality of the work, exactly like those maps. And I wanted that almost crude, rustic, ancient, kind of unreliable feel to those maps.
Mhm.
And that was purposeful, especially if you notice that the Anibia or Southernland is mostly uncharted and blank. Well, there's reasons behind that, which I can't get into, but at the same time, I very much was looking for a certain mood and looking for creating something specific with those maps. And that, but Christian, that's an excellent suggestion. That does sound, especially for future books where I will be looking for maps that are a bit different. That sounds like a fantastic suggestion that I'm gonna DM you and chat about that. These.
Nice. And had a couple of more comments. I support UPL from my
Wow.
friend Alan. Though I
Oh,
cannot
thank
stay
you.
it since I haven't read book 1.
Oh, thanks so much, Alan.
And I also have to say I am a huge fan of the 45-time Strategos Photocon, the slasher of the speechless. Alan's fantastic.
Yeah, he's great.
Yes, he is.
He's fantastic.
Just to go back to, we were talking about that bridge scene, and just to go back to it for a second, I came off of just reading John Gwynne, and your work has been compared to John Gwynne by others, I know. But what's interesting, and I think it might just be that both of you are talking about, I'm talking out of my ass here, so Miles, feel free to tell me that this is wrong, but that you're dealing with two different cultures that have similar battle tactics, possibly with the shield wall, that it was very reminiscent of things that I had just previously read in Gwyn. And I thought, for me, what made that scene, or just your fight scenes in general, so interesting is there is still that kind of feeling of rallying, the feeling of, what's the word I'm looking for? The joy, this is maybe the wrong word, but of a battle beforehand that gets you hyped up. And that's why a lot of people really enjoy fantasy battle scenes, because I'm not going to be in a shield wall, but I get to experience that kind of hype through reading scenes like that. And it had that same kind of feeling to it at the beginning, but then it was balanced with the reality of what the battle actually looks like. In comparison to maybe other fantasy that isn't wrong, it's just a different tactic, which continues with the kind of more glorious feel. So I really liked the balance between giving that feeling of hype, like, oh, a battle's coming, and then the reality of it hitting after. So I was wondering if that's something that you consciously write into your battle scenes, or if it's something that just kind of naturally flows, that balance between the two.
No, that's an excellent point, Taylor. For me, battle scenes are all about the build-up, and the battle scene itself. I try to write them fairly quick, bloody, dirty, and messy. However, there's everybody's brave and hyped up on mead, etc., and thinking that they're going to punch someone in the mouth until they have a sword thrust at them or an axe coming at them, or everybody's really yep, we're going to win and we're going to carry the day, and we're going to crush our enemies under our foot, until you step on that bridge and there's crazy people that are crazier than you, swinging axes at you and looking to kill you. And there's entrails and there's blood that you're slipping on, and you can't see, and you're claustrophobic in your helmet, and someone just pokes a sword out of a shield, and next thing you know, you lose an eye, But what I do, one thing specifically, Taylor, I'm really glad you picked that up, and of course I'm nowhere near the caliber of a John Gwynn or a Christian Miles Cameron or a Jenny Wirtz when it comes to writing battle scenes. However, I love the inspirational speech prior to a battle, because Othrin aspires and wants to be that person who, like Welly, can really rile up the troops. And, he looks to Welly for that. And now you've seen Welly give 2 fairly inspirational quick speeches prior to battles. One, the battle in the Gorge in Nyremia, and now before the bridge. And, but Welly is an outlandish king with a lot of moxie and a lot of street cred when it comes to those kind of fights. Othrin is somewhat of a new commodity. And again, he's riding that reputation of having killed Hor, who was supposedly one of the best warriors in Acremia. But Welly, on the other hand, Othrin, for the most part, yeah, he's been in battle and he's been wounded in battle, etc. But he hasn't fought battles like Welly has. Welly's fought down and dirty in everything from raids to pitched campaigns to sieges, to you name it. So, Welly knows what's coming in that battle on the bridge. He knows that the men that they're facing, those are his men. He's trained with them. He knows how good they are. He knows that they're not going down without a very bloody, messy fight. So he needs to inspire his men. He puts a little levity in there. Eld's very self-defacing. He jokes with his belly. You see that kind of humor and, trying to keep things, hey. And then Welly does something really, just to quickly wrap up this battle speech, Welly does something interesting in that battle speech. And he actually says, how are we going to beat these guys? These guys train on this bridge every day on how to defend it. That's their job, right? They know every corner. They know every stone. They know every crack. They know when it feels slippery, but really it's sure, and vice versa. How are you guys going to beat these guys? These guys are badass. And these guys know, the only way you're going to beat them is you got to be more ferocious. You got to be fearless. You got to take these guys head on. If you cower these guys, if you don't, that you're done. So that's the kind of inspiration that I think Othrin hopes that he can provide troops. And we'll see if he gets the opportunity in the future to provide those kind of speeches, because I think he's a bit envious of Welly being able to do that.
I have a question, and it is a pure question. How do you see the equipment, the military equipment of the Luncheons and the Atlanteans? I'll tell you what I see. I see the Atlanteans as late Byzantines with their matching equipment, their kite-shaped shields, and a little tiny bit of plate armor, a couple of maybe shoulders, maybe a gorget. So they're like in 1250. And I see the Luncheons as Anglo-Saxon England ready to maybe fight the Normans. A little technologically disadvantaged even on the bridge. That's how I saw the way that fight. It's not just bravery. It's a little harder to kill the top Atlanteans in their better armor. But I just was curious if that was what you were seeing, because you don't always, and this is not a criticism, you're not a material culture nut. So you don't always describe all the material culture. So give it to me now. Tell me what you see.
You are absolutely correct, Miles. The only thing I will say is if you recall, throughout all this time, the Atalanteans, Thurl, Glathan, and Othrin are deported as Luncheon soldiers. So They're mostly just wearing the leather. So they don't have their Atalantean chainmail. They don't have the kind of armament that they're used to carrying. The one thing they do have, though, is the superior blades, the Atalantean steel. So they've kept that. They've kept their daggers and they kept their swords. So that essentially was part of the difference in winning that battle. And beyond that, they had that rallying speech from Welly that got them fired up, and they had 3 fighters in the front ranks that were, some of the best fighters in that situation, right? Thurl is completely a suicidally brave nutso, so that has no fear of anything. And when he starts killing people, people realize that, how are we going to take this guy down, right? So that was a big part of, and Senti is close to that level as well. So was Hanny, but of course, unfortunately, Hanny perished. But when you talk about the weapons and armament that protect them, in that case, they were, deported just like their other luncheon counterparts, essentially with leather armor, but it was the swords that was. And remember, in that battle, Thurl chose to wield predominantly a spear, right? He and Thurl can fight with any weapon. Othran, because he wasn't as comfortable with anything other than a sword, he held on to what he believes is, the superior steel of Atalantean steel, and forwent using an axe, which would have come in handy perhaps in hooking shields and things like that. But yeah, because he didn't feel he was quite as confident with it, right? He knows he's a bit quicker with his sword. He's got decent reflexes, so that's the weapon he chose. So yeah, but no, you're absolutely right. You actually hit the nail on the head in terms of roughly the period we're talking about, in terms of the armor that the different cultures are wearing. You nailed it. You nailed it.
I have a question I want to follow up because you've mentioned Thurl a couple of times, and his superior abilities, fighting abilities. But I wonder if I've missed something about him. Does he have magical abilities? Because you've described like he doesn't sleep, his eyes of a cat. Maybe that's a spoiler. I don't know. But I
don't think PL wants to talk about that right now.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
your eyes gave you away there, PL. Let's not spoil this any further.
Yeah. Okay. Go.
No.
We're reading the foreshadowing too quickly. We're bringing it up too quickly.
I
Go ahead,
wasn't
Layla.
sure if I missed something because the first time you read through a book, I thought, well, have I missed something here that I should know? So, but we don't want to talk about that one. I actually have another scenario to talk about, which is I found it interesting that for Othran and his sense of honor and his struggle, to be faithful to Aliaz, when he was meeting with Lysi. He gets to, he and Welly get to his kingdom, and next thing he finds out, Welly, Saida blames her actions on the fact that Welly cheated on her, and not only cheated on her, but there is, a prince running around out there somewhere, and so. At that point, Othran there was nothing else he could do but, continue on with what he had committed to. But I, again, just thinking of foreshadowing, if Welly can break his oath once, okay, I'll stop there. No, if Welly can break his oath once, it makes me suspicious of Welly. And I think that's a good thing. So I'll leave it at that. But then it does make you start thinking about moral dilemmas, because then, he still is tempted by Lysi himself. So, that can go in a lot of directions, actually.
Yeah, well, I will quickly address both your questions. Number one, I can say up front that without spoiling that because a Thurl is his abilities are not based in magic. I'll leave it at that. His abilities are based in constant training and constant training with a variety of weapons and relentlessly training, turning himself into essentially a killing machine. And that will be more apparent as the series goes on. The level of training and commitment that he has, that has created, the warrior that he is. Regarding, Lysi and Othran and Welly, there will be some further resolution about Welly and that whole arc with regard his infidelity to Cinna especially. But yes, Othran is always ready to be a hypocrite in terms of, almost straying with Lysi, but then casting aspersions on Welly for doing that, because of course Welly fathered a child out of wedlock, et cetera, et cetera. Othran, in his mind, he is very, very, very quick to delineate between, well, you crossed the line. I didn't cross the line, but you crossed the line, right? So Yedwall crossed the line and committed all these atrocities and murdered children, but I wouldn't cross that line, or I didn't cross that line. Yeah, I had Glathan killed Sida, but I didn't, Othran's very good at this moral parsing in terms of, well, you did this, and that means that, you're wrong, but I didn't quite do that. I did this, but it wasn't, this moral flexibility that he talks about with Lysi. He's very adept at that. So, that's something that, we get used to from our beloved, Othran. So.
Right.
Yeah, the way he treated Senti at the end, I was like, boy, if you don't get like when he was the way that he had a tirade, at Senti for his one mistake, I'm like, that's a pot calling the kettle black. Of course, it was on purpose, but it had its intended effect on me as a reader. But one thing that I really love about this book, there's a lot that I do, but it deals heavily with themes that I personally really enjoy reading about, which are the moral implications of holding a seat of power and how religion is used in different facets of society, how it can be used for a rallying force or a divisive force, or just how that's been used or how it can be used at a societal level. So this book really deals with both of those themes. And for me, one moment that I was like, oh no, I was worried for the future was when Othran decides to change the history, makes a decided decision to say, yeah, we didn't get kicked out. And I was like, that's, as Janny was saying earlier, I was like, that's going to come back. That's not a good choice. And we can objectively know it's not a good choice and also know at the same time that that's what happens. So I really like where you're going with that theme specifically, and also the religion theme. I'm really enjoying those.
Well, thank you so much, Taylor. I know, Miles, you probably have to run soon, but I do want to quickly address what Taylor said, is that, and Miles, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you enjoyed the book. It means a lot to me. I just want to give you a chance to say some quick words as you sign off.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your conversation with Taylor. Sorry, Taylor, I saw that too. Thank you for asking that for me. I will come back and watch the show to see what he answers. Thank you guys for having me. I'm so sorry I have to go. This is fantastic. I hope you invite me the next time. I have about 11 other comments to make, so look at what you're being freed from. Anyway, thanks. Lovely being with all of you. Catch you next time.
See you.
See you.
Othran is very much someone who understands that, as I said before, Taylor, he is illegitimate. He's, in his mind, he's stealing leadership of people and the throne and the nation. And to do that, he must, in some ways, rewrite history to make the history suit his narrative that will legitimize him. And that is something that, is not without precedence throughout history, especially in the context of medieval kings, to which often is analogous. It is not lost, or should not be lost on students of history, that this is something that has gone on for centuries. And Othran is only doing, essentially, in some ways, what is pragmatic for him to hold on to power and for him to have a glorious reputation that will survive him, and ensure that his lineage is held up to this standard, this standard, which isn't true at all. And that is part of what successful and effective rulers need to do to stay in power. and that's a tough thing to see. And I believe you will see Janny, who's read the third book, is much more about the struggle between, can a good man be a good king, and vice versa? Is it even possible, based on the choices that you have to make, the impossible choices? Can the CEO of a company be profitable if he has to protect the environment? Is his or her responsible as a CEO to shareholders to make money, or is it to be an ethical, principled person? Like those are the impossible choices you have to make in Othrin's position, and he doesn't always handle them in ways that, in the lens of today's morals, ethics, looking at, we would go, oh, are you kidding me? There's no way I would make that decision. Well, I think we have to consider the context, and I think we have to consider what Othrin is dealing with, and I think we have to consider the legitimate struggle between ethics, morals, values, even your religious, values, and what it takes to hold on to power.
Hey, at least he promoted Glathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Othrin knows that, of all the characters in the Drowned Kingdom Saga, Glathan is probably the closest. He's ultimately, in my opinion, which you'll see other characters that are quite impressive. I mean, Hurt is an impressive ruler, and in his own right, so is Welly. But Glathan is probably the one character who is probably best suited to be a king, but isn't. Because but you have to remember, though, I'm sure even Glathan would admit that his role is somewhat easier because he's not the king. When you're the king, you can't do the same things you can as being the second command or the Sparrow, etc. You have to function differently. So Glathan's natural goodness and wisdom and smarts, etc. Glathan can be ruthless when he needs to be, and he is quite determined to protect Othrin. But Glathan also has a real moral compass and a real soul and a conscience that really shines through his character. He's also very kind, and he's very thoughtful, and he's introspective, and and I think you see in the third book, Glathan in his new position is pushed in all kinds of ways to perform at a level that really without him, where would Othrin be? Where would Othrin be without him? Period. But but in the defense of Othrin, it's a lot easier to be that 2IC, that right hand person, than it is to be the actual person inside. You give all the advice you want, and you can carry out all the instructions you want, but at the same time, when you're the person actually making the decisions, ultimately responsible, it is a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
When, just speaking of Glathan, I think we're supposed to, or Glathan, sorry, apologies, Glathan. I think you're really supposed to like him, and I do. He's my child. And when Cydia cursed him with her last breath, I was like, oh, no. So I think, he gives us that character to root for unapologetically, because we're in this first person perspective with Othrin, where we might like him on one page and hate him on the next. It gives us that pillar to cling to, and I'm worried he's going to be in peril in the future, and I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy with you, PL.
Well, I make the statement now. I made it in when I originally did the interview with Steve, or the author interview way back. I said candidly, this, like some great writers, Janny Wirth included, Christian Miles Clayman included, the George R. R. Martins, etc. I have zero compunction whatsoever about killing characters. So do not get attached. I hope you do, in a way, like, sorry, not sorry. I hope you get attached, but do not get attached to anyone, including Othrin, or anyone surrounding him, because, based on the nature of Othrin's, outlook, the situation that he finds himself in, his glory seeking, his willingness and ability to put himself in the middle of the fray, and other people that may rush to protect him. You can imagine that the casualty count is going to be high by the end of 7 books, and that a lot of the people surrounding Othrin may or may not make it. So some will make it, and some will make it, but not everyone will.
That doesn't bode well.
No. There's a quiet silence.
Yeah, right. We're just processing that for a minute. But I am really curious. I hope you don't mind just the fact that I know you on a personal level. I do know that you are a person of faith yourself. So introducing the idea of religion, as I mentioned earlier, in such an intense way in this book, I'm wondering if there was a personal compunction to want to explore this, or it just naturally fit into the world with Othran being from such a strong monotheistic place originally. I'm just curious, what, not your motivations, but some of your connection to that theme in this story.
Well, I very much, and I hinted a bit on this in the last deep dive, of which we were all a part, I think, with the exception of Layla, that, yes, I am a spiritual person. I consider myself spiritual. I wanted to make that delineation between spirituality, faith, and religion. And that I mentioned this before, in that I honestly believe that they're two separate entities, and that the trappings surrounding faith, which is religion, are human made and subject to flaws and subject to potentially perversion, can be very much a force for good and a force for positive. And I believe that were not for that hierarchy and those trappings, we might have destroyed ourselves a long time ago, and especially during the early years of civilization. I think that religion played a really important part. However, it's also religion, formalized religion, organized religion, is also responsible for horrible atrocities and horrible things down throughout the centuries, well documented. Need to go into them. And I'm not picking on any particular religion or faith. I'm just saying in general. So, in the Drowned Kingdom Saga, I wanted to depict a person who was at the center of that battle between faith, worship, deity, and religion, which is the construct, the hierarchy, the human-made thing that surrounds it. And I wanted to show that that unfortunately, if you're caught up in the hierarchy part, the trappings, whether or not a prelate wears purple versus white, whether or not one type of petitioner is allowed to worship at a more affluent temple than another, whether or not someone is going to be persecuted. What's the line of persecution? Oh, someone has visions and is inspired by angels. Well, they must be especially blessed, or they must be a heretic because it's witchcraft and magic. And who decides that? Well, it's the hierarchy, right? So that's the difference between being burned at the stake and being deified. It's just those are the things that fascinate me, and those are things I want to illustrate that can be potentially problematic in life, right? When our focus is more on the religion than on the faith. I understand why religion is important. I understand why we've needed it. I just want to point out that we have to be careful with it, and we have to handle it sensitively, and that we have to have an appreciation for other faiths and non-faiths, because sometimes, occasionally, because of our faith, we can potentially exclude or look down on others who are not of the same faith, even of the same denomination within a faith, right? So, and that is problematic. And those are some of the themes that I try to explore and touch on in this book. And that is, I guess, yes, on a personal level, Taylor, that is affecting me deeply over my life of almost 54 years, that I've seen, unfortunately, too much of that, whereby someone's faith is belittled, mocked. There's bigotry against the faith. There's bigotry within a faith, different sects, and I've seen too much of that. And again, I'm not picking on any particular religious faith. I'm saying pick all your major religions and pick more. I've seen too much of that. So I think that that was part of what went into Othran, that I wanted to illustrate, that we need to be really careful when we consider that particular aspect of faith and religion.
Yeah, I like that. And I did notice that. So, it does bring up questions, good questions, as to where things are going to go in the future, and who Anchali actually is, and, all of that. So, And
I
because
am so suspicious. He's enemy number one in my mind.
and he visited Yedwall too, so the plot thickens, you know.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
you know, I will say this. I'll say three things. One, be careful of me because sometimes I throw out, as Janie would say, these Chekhov guns that may or may not go anywhere or may not be leading where you think they're leading. But at the same time, sometimes I do. And second of all, you know, right now we're in an early stage, really and truly, because I know people don't realize it is a 7-book series. It's not a trilogy. It is a 7-book series. So by the end of the 7-book series, I can guarantee you that to a certain degree, I can't promise entirely, because there will be a subsequent 7-book series following the Drowned Kingdom Saga, and there will be 2 separate prequel trilogies that will explore all kinds of things that are very relevant and germane to what happens in this series. So not all the mysteries will be revealed, but you will have a certain amount of them revealed to, I think, some degree of satisfaction regarding things like the Anchali, Sure Steel, the sword. You know, like you'll have some of those things. You'll get an idea of where things are going. You won't have everything wrapped up in a bow because that will happen, you know, down the road in future books beyond this series. But you'll have enough that you'll be like, okay, I kind of understand some of what's going on, and I continue to lead you to where the eventual wrap up is. So.
Something I really liked was that he thinks he's not sure where he learned is Eltish now, and I really like
Eldnish,
that.
yeah. Eltnish.
Eltish, and I really like that because it does make me question his state of mind and what he actually remembers. And actually, I kind of relate to it. I mean, my longtime friends I've known since I was 20, they might say, "Oh, remember when this happened?" I'm like, I have no memory of that, And so I kind of related to that same sort of situation. But I think for him, it's a lot deeper than just, forgetting a little thing like being tutored for months on a language. So, yeah.
That's an excellent point that you picked that up, Layla. You know, and I mean, while it is plausible that could happen, that you could literally, as a child, be taught a language and you don't use it, you don't practice it. Taylor, you're multilingual. You know, like, you could have learned something when you were a child, never used it, and then later on, someone says it in that language, something clicks in, maybe not the whole thing, but it is plausible. There have been actually documented cases of that happening, and that was part of my research for the book. But that doesn't mean that's exactly what's going on. It could be something very different. So, but we're not going to find out about that aspect until later on in the series.
How fun is that for you to hear all the different ideas?
Well, it's a hell of a lot of fun, and I think on the last deep dive, Janie and what Janie was there, especially, and Jani's is writing a series like that where you have no idea what's really going on, even 2, 3, 4, 5 books in. You really don't, and that's where I am in Jani's series. That I'm immersed, I'm totally engaged and enraptured, but I only know so much, right? And I will not know, and I have no idea until I continue to read subsequent books. And yes, that is very much like my books, and that's a hell of a lot of fun, because I every writer loves to talk about their work. I'm no different, and I truly appreciate the people that message me and DM me and say, "I have a theory about this. I think that so and so," and I love that stuff, right? And when I get those DMs or messages or someone through the website, "I have a theory about the Anchali. I think blah blah," and and we talk and we chat and go back and forth. That's a blast, and I really appreciate the people that care enough about reading my book to have these theories, and yeah, like it's fun. And but that's part of the beauty of writing a long series where you can slowly pull back the curtain just a bit at a time and tease you, and then as things finally are revealed, like, oh my god, that was in plain sight all along. Because one thing that I love doing is, and one quality I do share with authors, I don't share my qualities with them, I believe, but I believe I love hiding things in plain sight. So I think that when you look back over the course of 7 books, you're gonna be like, how the hell could I miss? That was what that was. That was what it was about. And and that doesn't mean that you weren't clever enough to figure it out. It just means that hopefully I did my job, and I led you astray enough, but still put it there that you didn't quite pick it up, or maybe you did, or maybe you picked up part of it. But I think that's part of the fun. Frankly, I think that's part of the fun.
I would imagine, as an author, I'd love that too. And I am really glad that Layla brought up that memory blip that we got at the end, because where my mind went from that is like, oh, our boy's got some trauma. Like, that's where my mind went. He's blanked a lot of stuff out here. And that's really interesting, we talked about the first person perspective already, but that is really interesting because it allows you to, it makes complete sense that we wouldn't know this until he realizes it. Right. So, and that's just my theory. I have full confidence in your ability to write a character that doesn't just, excuse me, have a sad boy background. Like, I don't think that that's what we're going to get. He's sad, so everything is okay that he did. I know that's not where it's going, but I would be really interested to learn more about his background, because it made me realize that we really don't know his childhood. And
we know that his mother abandoned. He didn't have his mother, and that really left a hole. You know that he was raised by Yedwall, who bends history to suit himself, except tortured conscience underneath. We know that on the big scale, he'll revise history to make sure that his kingship stands, and that we weren't chucked out of our homeland. We were, we saved ourselves from this catastrophe, but we were not traitors. So why wouldn't he necessarily embroider his childhood details to suit? We don't know. This is something that we got to wait and see, but we know he's willing to bend the truth, and we know he's willing to lie, and we know he's willing to gloss over his real flaws. So that's something I think we'll just have to be patient and know that Paul's going to reveal it in his own good time. And maybe it'll kick our teeth out and it'll be fun.
Well, let me tell you 5 things that you do know about Othran based on, and Taylor raised the extra point that he is an unreliable narrator, because he is. And any first-person perspective is unreliable. My version of events will differ from Taylor's, from Steve's, from Layla's, from Janet. If we all go to a concert and we all see that the band played this song and played it this way, we'll all go back to our family members and go, oh yeah, this is what happened. And it'll be totally different. Right? So that's what I love about first-person perspective. And I love the unreliable narrator. It's one of the things that I love about fiction, and that's why I choose to write it. Here's 5 things you know about Othran according to him. Othran, as Jenny said, lost his mother prior to his own birth. His father blamed him for the death of his mother. His father was in love with his mother and blamed him for that, and took that out on Othran. Othran was a spare heir that Erthel, his brother, treated coldly as well, and unfairly and cruelly. And that is according to Othran in the Drowned Kingdom. There is an extensive few chapters about Othran's upbringing. Othran was brought up in a family that was completely ruthless, and it was all about maintaining the blood being clean and preserving the bloodline, etc. The example is, Yedwall the Bard being essentially betrothed to Erthel's mother and having her ripped away to be married to Othran's mother to produce an heir. So, we know a lot of things about Othran based on a Drowned Kingdom. We know that he grew up in the shadow of his brother, trying to prove himself. He was a better warrior, he believed, a smarter leader, a more capable person, and that he believed his brother knew it too. But yet he was the second. So he was never going to be able to advantage that unless he carved a niche for himself, somewhat like Yedwall, where he was that superior warrior to his brother, because he can do that. And of course, being the king, his brother was never going to be, at a certain point in his brother's life, his brother wasn't going to be the frontline guy, because that's not the way his brother led. Othran was going to be. So Othran saw his future as being like Yedwall. Othran was also, his mother figure was Yedwall's wife, Lilovis, so that was his mother figure. Othran was engaged to Alias from a young age, and she was the only woman that he really had other contact with, for the most part, other than Yedwall's wife. So we do know some things about Othran. We know enough to know that we can kind of understand why he is the way he is. He was privileged. He was a spare heir. He was in his brother's shadow. His brother and his father were cold to him. He lost his mother, never knew her, relied on his aunt and his uncle as mother and father figures, and had a lot of issues. Cleaved to his wife early. She was kind of but not in a not in a true partnership way, as in a crutch way. So she was his crutch, and seeing himself as always being superior to her as a woman. And the way it works in Atalantics, yeah, you're the queen, but that's just because you married the king. You're not a queen in your own right, or you're not a lady if you're a lord in your right to lord in your own right. That we do know enough about Othrin to understand why he thinks the way he thinks. He's at the pinnacle of society. He was at the pinnacle of a society that thought they were at the pinnacle of every society. He had, he had a dysfunctional family relationship. He was closer to his cousins than he was to his own brother and father. And he very much wanted to prove himself and had these secret aspirations to be more, but didn't see a real viable method for that to happen.
He also took his heroes out of books in history. His obsession with the Purple Prince. They weren't necessarily the best of choices for role models, but he fixed on them. So yeah, he did a lot of daydreaming, and he did a lot of styling himself after attributes that were really on paper.
Yep, that's an exceptional point, Jenny. And when we go back into the prequels and we get to see what some of those people were really like, I believe we will learn that they weren't the way Othrin envisioned them. So that should be fun. But yes, Othrin, Jenny, that's an exceptional point. Othrin daydreams about being one of the heroes of legend. He sees himself as, and especially now at the end of the book, he is crowned king, and Glathan has given him this moniker of Othrin the Great, just embellishing and enhancing his reputation even more, and his people have bought into it, right? King Othrin the Great. Thank you, Heather. King Othrin the Great. So now he's got that moniker behind him. He's got the reputation to live up to, but also he's got the reputation to fall back on, right? But as you will see in Lord and King, that can be a difficult reputation to live up to.
I loved the final scene of the book where he cries, and that's the end. I was that final scene. I was like, yes, PL. This is exactly how this book should have ended. I say as the ultimate authority on this book. I really loved that final scene.
Well, thank you. That scene was a culmination of a lot of things. And three of the things that it was a culmination of is Othrin looking back at his life, at his dysfunctional family, at the people who played a role in getting to where they are, most of which are dead, to the best of his knowledge. And, him going, you know what? In some ways I stand on the shoulders of these people, but in truth, I'm me. And I've kind of done a lot of this on my own, but I wish they could see me do it. I wish, because I want people to acknowledge my greatness. I want these people that I cared about, that I looked up to, I want them to see me now in my glory, but they're not here to see it. Right. Mm-hmm. And that was very sad and very tragic in a way, that there was. The other part is that him wanting to believe that he was something better, something different. In the last part of those last few pages, just as he did after Yedwal relayed the tale of the battle for Haref, Othrin castigated Yedwal. And in a way, Othrin, he made that conscious separation between himself and Yedwal, in that I'm different. As much as my uncle was a war hero, as much as he was great, I'm different. I'm better. I'm not going to be that guy. Or as that's what he thinks anyways. Mm-hmm. Although I've patterned myself after Yedwal, I've seen him as my, as that's the ideal that it's time. That time is gone now, and Yedwal's dead, and he's gone down, the river, and now I have to be a king, and I have to be different than that, because I've achieved more than what Yedwal achieved. I'm now bigger than what he was. So, and then probably the biggest thing that he realized in that scene that made him cry was that he's made these friends in these relationships along the way. He's great friends with Hurt. He's like a father figure. But more than that, while he was hiding out as a legitimate soldier, he made friends with Dunk. He made friends with Hanny. He got to be really close with Senti. And, he liked people like Cricht. And he even liked Badan, right? Badan, who was, this crusty asshole. And he lost them all. He lost almost all of them. He lost them along the way. And he came out of that changed, humbled. He had to disguise himself as a common soldier. He had to, be that guy in the background. He had to eat poor food. He had to not be able to speak up and say, "Hey, guess what? I'm the prince. You should be listening to me." Like he had to do all that, and that experience changed him. It did humble him, but it changed him. It altered who he was.
Mhm.
But maybe the capping thing on all of this is that, I repeat this again, Othran has essentially, if the angels to be believed, and Othran is essentially illegitimate, Othran has successfully, after all these trials and tribulations, stolen a throne from essentially the Yedwalls. He's disinherited them, and he's stolen a throne. So you can imagine that. Can someone rest easy when you know that your own rule is based potentially on illegitimacy? Right? Can you do that? And tied up with that is the fact that he's got this angel that he's not quite sure about. He's got this sword that's haunted. He's got these mages around him that he can't deny these weird things that have happened involving them and their religion. And he's got all these things in his head that, how am I going to reconcile all these things? Right? And that's a very emotional moment, and that's why he cries. All these things are weighing down on him, right? So
Was part of his crying too also was maybe I'm going to be that guy.
Mm.
yeah, that's an excellent point,
He
Jane.
said I had to kill a woman. I said I would never do. He had to do things he said he would never do, including wading through the shit.
No, that's an excellent point. And he's also crying, I would add, for the end of the Atalanteans as they know it. I said this at the beginning of this podcast that, the Atalanteans are now no longer just the Atalanteans. They're part of East Realm. They're part of a nation which will be not homogenous. It will be blended with Elnish.
Yeah, good luck keeping the bloodline pure. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah, the Elnish will outnumber them. They will be something different than what they were. They are Atlanteans, a minority in the middle of a continent with different races, cultures, religions. They are the minority. They want to project themselves as being this important majority. But really and truly, they are the minority. And they have no idea about some of the cultures and the antiquity and the power and the grace and the importance of some of the cultures that exist, in their orbit. They have no idea. Othran has some clue, but Othran, he's not willing to admit that, right?
He's still calling them barbarians. He is still calling them barbarians, even though a lot of the architecture, a lot of the things that he's witnessed overturns that completely. He still calls them barbarians. And their unclean habits, and they don't bathe, and they don't this, and they don't that.
Yeah, and as you know, Jenny, from reading the third book, we'll see what happens when he starts to, his eyes start to be opened a bit more. We'll see what
he came from a hot culture. A lot easier to stay clean in a hot culture than a place where everything freezes every winter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and beyond that, Othran, without giving too much away from book 3, just think about this, right? You have been the number one, the number one quarterback, running back, goalie, catcher for most of your career in whatever league or arena you are in, right? And then someone comes up and you realize, oh, shoot, that person over there was putting up way bigger numbers than me. That person over there has more MVPs than me. I wasn't aware of how good that person was. I kind of thought, I was the top dog, but really and truly, maybe I'm not. That is not something easy to accept, right? And, hubris in Othran that's an organic trait, right? He's hubris. But beyond that, it's one thing for someone to tell you that you're no longer the top dog. It's another thing to see that for yourself, right? And Othran's seen bits and pieces. He's gotten hints. Other people have told him it's third party, but he hasn't. He's only seen it to a certain degree. He acknowledges that his Outnish colleagues have nobility, can be capable, have good qualities, but he still someone looks at them as lesser, and ultimately that lesser is because his religion in his mind is superior. Even if he allowed everything else, his religion in his mind separates them. At the end of the day, that's the one thing that ultimately makes him better. But if he's stripped of that, what will happen? right?
Mm.
If he's stripped of that, if
Well,
he's
more than that, he doesn't have that comfortable place to crawl back to anymore. He's in a different world. He can't go back to being comfortably in a homogeneous culture where he is the top dog. He can't go back to a place where everybody's kissing his ass whether he had the skills to hold his own or not. So he has built this crepe paper image of himself, and now he has to live up to it. He hasn't got a fucking choice, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, it's got to be a
And-
scary position of seeing all of his inadequacies, knowing that they're real. And the only thing he's got is this rigid role of structure that he's got to continue to uphold, even if it's his downfall. So I think there's a real crack in his facade at the end of this book where he realizes the thin ice he's really treading on. He can't ever go back to that massive culture that would support everything he believed. It is gone. It sank.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And the word that made that click for me just now was when PL used the word minority, because he is damn lucky that people haven't treated him the way they treated Barafet. Like, he still has his religion. No one tore down his idols. He was able to establish that, and he's damn lucky as a minority that he was able to keep that, and he met hurt and people who are able to respect something that they don't believe in. But that's not the way it usually works, and that's not the way Atalantics treated other people. So
that's an exceptional point,
it just
Taylor.
clicked for
That
me.
that is an exceptional point, and that is an exceptional point, and I will add to that Arthur is convinced that now in his mind, okay, maybe I won't betray my enemies, maybe I won't go back on my word, but I will still rule the world because I will show them our noblesse as a society. They will naturally see how great we are, how our religion is better, how we're the superior fighters, how we're the superior civilization, and they will see that the essence of the Atalanteans is still superior. Yeah, we're not what we were, we're diminished, but we are still superior, and they will see that just by following our example, just by because we're going to be so great, so noble, so kind, so smart, so intelligent, such great words, such everything. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to show them and set an example that they will be powerless but to follow, and they'll want to follow me to the ends of the earth, and they'll want to make me basically. They will walk over backwards to let me rule them eventually, in time, as they get to know me, and we get to show them how great we are. So that is what he's believing now. He's believing that just by osmosis and just by showing people who and what he believes that he and the Atlanteans are, that they will be like, oh yeah, you need to be the one offering to lead us. Yeah, you're the yeah. That's what he believes. He may find out a bit differently as we go on in the books, and I think Janny, who's read Lord and King, knows that Arthur's in for a difficult ride.
As they say, what could possibly go wrong? You know? It's so yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Nana.
No, I was going to say, even with all of that, there's something about his sincerity that still makes me sympathetic to him. It's almost it's a sense of naivete too, you know. Like when he's saying, I'm going to be loyal to Aliaz, and just talking about his honor. And there is a sincerity that comes out even as he is being, you know, misogynist and racist and homophobic, you know, just at the same time. I'm not saying he's being endearing while he does that, while he expresses those beliefs, but just as a person, he gives off the impression that he is trying to do the right thing, and that keeps me reading. You know, that keeps me interested to see how he is going to reconcile all of this.
Well, I appreciate that because quickly, Arthur believes he's doing the right thing, but I would submit that how many people that are racist, misogynist, bigoted believe that they are? I would submit that 95% of them don't believe that they are. And I would submit that 95% of them think that they're good people and that they're doing good things and that there's nothing wrong with their views. I would argue that, you know, Arthur is no different from a lot of people that we know who are like that. And we are flawed human beings and we're not very good at seeing our own flaws. But I would submit that people who are like that are probably maybe perhaps less capable, don't have the emotional intelligence of some of us to actually go, you know what, there's something wrong with the way I'm thinking. And Authren, for all of his faults, like anybody who is flawed, has some redeeming traits. It doesn't mean that they're overall redeeming,
Right.
but he has some redeeming traits, and he wants to do the right thing. In some cases, he doesn't even know what that is, but he does want to do that. He has a very rigid code of honor based on chivalry, for one thing, that is incompatible with 90% of the things he has to do as a ruler. So there's that. Beyond that, he is thrust in an almost impossible situation that were he just the king of Atalantics, he would be much more capable of negotiating and reconciling some of those things than being a king in a totally foreign land, right? I mean, he is in a predicament that no other Atalantean lord in charge of what's left of the Atalanteans would have found themselves in. So, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that last line. Oh, that was a great way to finish the book. Loved it.
Yeah, and I know we're wrapping up soon, but I just want to quickly say that I can't thank you all enough for taking the chance to read my work. Of all the books that you could be reading, that you chose to read mine, Steve, Taylor, Jenny, and Layla, and Miles, and so thank you for that. It means so much to me. I write these books with love. I write these books hopefully to provide something that's going to make people think and make you think, and that's going to stay with you. Some of the things that you read will stay with you beyond just some that you read, and perhaps the compelling themes are there to make you, or the characters in there to make you remember it. I'd like to crave your indulgence that I believe I'm growing and learning as a writer. I'm certainly not the best writer in the world, but I'm trying, and I believe that I hope you will all see, because that's my goal, continuous improvement with each book, that you can say, okay, you know what, I like this book. The next book I believe is stronger. Oh, the next book even stronger. That's my goal. I may fall short, but just so you're aware, that is my goal. So I'm hoping that legitimately you'll be able to feel that each book builds on the next, and that each book hopefully gets better. So, but thank you for taking the chance.
Yeah,
You don't need to thank me. I'm tired of reading books I can predict. I'm tired of reading books that don't have depth. I'm tired of reading books that are shallow and I can predict what's going to happen. And I'm tired of characters that are just little rubber baby dolls and fluff. I like a book with meat in it. And I'm a little bit of a maverick. A lot of the books that are super popular, yeah, I've read them, but they don't move me. I look for a book that moves me, and you're doing it, Paul. You're doing it.
You are.
Don't put a blanket over your head and say, thank you for giving my books a chance. Believe me, if they weren't worthy of my time, if I wasn't enjoying the heck out of them, I'd have stopped a long time ago. I wouldn't be giving this the time of day. So there's nothing in my life that I do because I feel I'm obligated, that I do because somebody told me I had to. At this age, or actually since I was about 18 and stopped high school, I don't do a thing unless I'm 100% behind it, because 100% is all that is worth it. Anything that's 75%, anything that's 50, anything that's a pretense, I don't have time for it. That's not what life is for. So I'm all in. I'm 100% behind you because you're doing a masterful job. This is the kind of book I like. It's the kind of book I love. So I'm going to back you 100% because I believe in it. That's simple.
Thank you, Jenny.
I was going to say the same beginning words, which is don't thank me, because I am also thoroughly enjoying myself. We talk a lot about prose, the three of us, Steve, PL and I, and how prose is something that's important to you. And I do read some books that care about that and some books that don't. And reading this one is refreshing for me in more ways than one. The prose part of it is one. And because it forces me to slow down. I can't read these books fast.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing in my mind. And so because I read them slow, the little details stick in ways that they might not with a different style of writing. So I'm enjoying myself as well. And I feel like it's challenging me in a good way as a reader to take my time, because it's, being a booktuber, we've talked about this as well, but quicker, getting the books out. And so it's nice to have a book that I know, okay, when I start this, I'm going to take my time with it. So I'm really enjoying reading it.
There's something else I want to push in here too. If you don't mind, I'm being terrible, I'm being rude, but there are books that they write them so that you can mold your own thoughts and feelings into them. They never push your boundaries. They never challenge you. They never shove you out of your comfortable little headspace. They call it transparent prose or whatever. And they leave so much undefined that really you overwrite your own baggage right over the top of what's happening on the page. I don't want a book like that. I want one that's going to kick me in the butt. I want one that's going to make me uncomfortable. I want to read a book that's going to change my viewpoint and my vantage. And too few books do that. That simple. Too few books do that. So sorry, Taylor, I was really rude. But I just had to put that in there.
No, I was reaching the end of my point, which is just essentially that I am also really enjoying the journey. That was all I had left to say.
I think, what I really enjoy is in the first book, The Drowned Kingdom, it really did blow my mind that the kingdom sank, even though that was the name of the book. And so, I don't know what that says about me, but it was the series of events that really kept me reading. And then this time, getting to know Othran better and just how complex he really is, that was like another level of depth that I just found fascinating. I think he's a really great character. And I do want to know what happens to him next. And just from what we've been saying, he has so many flaws, but then for some reason I'm still sympathetic to him, and that's interesting. And I like that. I like that.
Well, thank you everyone for your comments. Hopefully that means I did my job. So if you want to keep reading, if you feel that Othran is sympathetic despite all of his many flaws, and if you believe that this is a book that challenges you and makes you want to find out what happens, then I thank you, because then I've done my job. So, but I know we're wrapping up. So again, I just want to say thank you so much for being willing to talk about my book with me. I'll turn over to Steve and let him, kind of finish things off. You haven't said a lot, Steve. I know that's how you are, but do your thing. But I hope you enjoyed the book. It sounds like you did.
There was times when I was in this book and I was like, damn, this is good. Like, it just, when you're reading something and it's like you get like a natural high when you read it. That's kind of the moments I had with this one. So
thank you.
Really good stuff. A couple of comments before we go from Drew. Hey everyone, I read PL's book. I haven't read PL's books yet, so I don't want to stay because of spoilers, but I did order both of his books today and we'll be reading them next month.
Thank you so much, Drew. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And our friend Tori. Hey guys, I haven't read the series yet, but I will can't wait and here to say PL, you are awesome.
Right back at you, Tori. Tori is incredible. Check out her channel. Amazing.
We truly don't deserve you, PL. I know Taylor always says that, but we don't deserve you.
Not true. Not true.
Yep.
I'm blessed to have you all.
I'll say it till the day I die.
Not true. I'm so blessed to have you all as friends. I thank you.
So before we go, PL, where can people get in touch with you if they want to find you or your work or your interviews and all the other stuff you do? You keep pretty busy.
For the most part, you can find me right beside you and Taylor on Page Chewing, which is an author and creative in the community feature where we interview all kinds of people, editors, bloggers, writers, you name it. And I think it's really coming to its own. And I just want to say, Steve, Taylor, and I are working really hard to bring you something that's going to be really engaging. And I think you're going to be really excited about this year, especially 2023, and some of the guests we have lined up. You can also find me on Before We Go blog. Steve, Taylor, and I are all bloggers there. Taylor and I are also assistant editors, led by the wonderful Beth Tabler. Shout out to Beth, our boss. So you can find my reviews there. We're in the middle of SPFBO. Taylor and I are also the judging team, so you can see our reviews for SPFBO books. We're in the finalist round, getting really exciting. Going to see who wins soon. The books, www.plstore.com. Once again, the first book, A Drowned Kingdom, is out, and so is the second, The Last of the Atalanteans. Lord and King is coming in the next few months. Arcs are out. I am very honored to have none other than Jenny Wirtz blurb the cover endorsement for my book. I mean, to have an iconic writer like Jenny say something positive, endorsing about my book is just, I mean, it's a dream of a lifetime. And the other 4 authors, all incredible authors as well, who are on the back cover, Eve Kogus, multi-award-winning author, and Tim Hardy and Holly Tinsley, SPFPO finalists, and amazing authors who will write. I am so lucky that people like that, of that caliber, want to say something nice about my book. So thank you for that. Twitter is my preferred social media handle at Stuart Writes. I'm pretty well a Twitter lurker. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, but you want to talk to me, business related or writing, or DM me on Twitter. That's where I lurk.
Nice. And Jenny, if people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to find you?
I'm all over the place. I have a forum on my website. There's a contact email address, which I welcome anyone to use. I'm on Twitter. I have a fan page on Facebook. It's mostly run by my web guy, but he will pass through important messages. So I'm not exactly hidden here. I have a pretty public front. So you can pop me a note on Twitter. And if I do have my DMs closed to keep the bozos, but if you tell me you want to follow back so you can contact me, just tell me. I'm not exactly being trampled by fans. So my email is, I always answer my own email and my public email, and I also have a public contact address. So I'm not exactly hidden. I'm the only Jenny Wirtz in the world. You can find me. I'm not hiding.
And Layla, where can people find you?
Right now on Twitter, under El Goshi or Baladi Magazine, hoping to have my website open soon for my own writing, because I have essays and poems and everything out there, and I'm trying to figure out how to pull them all together into one place. So hopefully my author site will be up soon as well.
Awesome. Let us know when that's done. We can be sure and boost the signal for you.
Okay.
And Taylor, where can people find you?
Well, next to these two, next to Stephen PL, on Page Chewing, as PL said. You can also find me at my BookTube channel, Made Between the Pages, which Page Chewing is also on. So Steve and I, we take turns kind of hosting them. So you can find all of those episodes on either of our channels. We have a playlist, both of us do. You can also find me on Twitter, just like everyone else mentioned here. That's more book-based, I would say, is what I use my Twitter for. I'd say those are the main places where you can find me if you want to talk about stories. And of course, on Before We Go blog, but PL also covered that as well.
I just want to say quickly, thanks so much for everyone watching that commented. And if you read the book, I appreciate it. I encourage you, if you can, I thank you so much, leave a review, no matter what the review is. I encourage everyone who's read the book, including my esteemed friends here, leave a review. The feedbacks help so much, and it just really helps authors, especially undersea authors. So if you read a book, especially indie authors, please leave a review if you can. It really means so much on whatever platform you prefer, Amazon, Goodreads, etc. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody, and looking forward to book 3. Yeah, we'll do the same. We'll do it again.
Yeah, Lord and King. Let's get the crew back together and let's do it one more time.
Absolutely. Yeah, lots
Consider
of books to come.
We got a big surprise in store. That book just blew my mind, and it did not go where I thought it was going to go. You have a big treat coming. I won't say any more, but you'll rip through it. You'll just eat it up. It's great.
Thank you, Jenny. And we all know Jenny Wirtz and Miles Cameron, they're special authors to me. I know we got to go, but one of the reasons why I started writing again as a writer was because of Miles Cameron and his Trader Sun cycle. And Jenny Wirtz is the author that makes me want to be better, makes me want to exceed standards. But if there are performance standards as a writer, she's the one that makes me want to do that. She's iconic, and if you haven't read Jenny Wirtz, you are missing out. So please go read her books.
Starting next month.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, next month's going to be lit. I'm so excited.
I need that as a sound bite.
Yeah.
I need that as my ringtone. That's great.
Yeah, it's gonna pop up in my next booktube video, Jenny.
You can't call me a jaded person. You know, I've been around a few decades, but I still am a 2-year-old. And I'm proud of it.
Oh, that's priceless, man. Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Uh,
Yeah, so I don't think we could top that. So, but thanks again, everyone, and thanks everyone for being in the chat and interacting with us. It's always a great time, and we will see everyone soon.
take care, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.